Good afternoon. We are still on morning, but in 1 minute, because I started early. Yeah, whatever. She's always late. She's always late. Stop hanging on my every word. Or start. I don't care. We are reading a new book, and the new book here today, as you can see from our little classroom title chalkboard there, is called Being Catholic Now. Prominent Americans talk about change in the church and the quest for meaning. So here we've got these little vignettes. You'll notice, I just like to say this because you'll notice that they're all following the same question format. Because, like, as I was reading, because I've read this before and it's great, thumbs up on it. I'm wondering, like, why they might not delve into this or that or whatever, right? You could see that they ended up having a list of questions to answer, which just keeps us all on track, thinking about the same things over and over again. Oh, what did they think about this? Why didn't they answer that? Well, they all answered the same questions. So I'm going to read about the author, who is Kerry Kennedy, which I was wondering is part of the Kennedy clan. And she is. Kerry Kennedy established the Robert F. Kennedy Memorial Center for Human Rights in 1988, and while leading more than 40 human rights delegations to more than 30 countries, has worked on diverse human rights issues such as child labor, disappearances, ethnic violence, and environmental protection. Oh, I should have been a Kennedy. Kennedy is the author. I mean, seriously, people hate me like they hate Kennedys too, so whatever. Kennedy is the author of Speak Truth to Power: Human Rights Defenders Who Are Changing Our World, which birthed an internationally showcased play, a stirring photographic exhibition, and a PBS documentary film. I've got to look all those up. Kennedy is a graduate of Brown University and Boston College Law School. She is also the mother of 3 daughters, Kara, Mariah, and Michaela. She looks like Joan Mudgett. I wondered if Mudgett wasn't a Kennedy. Okay, so acknowledgments. Let's get to the introduction, shall we? I was in Rome on the night that I received the happy news that Random House would publish this book exploring what it means to be a Catholic. 12 hours later, I was shaking hands with Pope Benedict the 16th. I had mixed feelings about meeting the Holy Father, who, as the leader of 1 billion Catholics worldwide, represented all I have come to love and admire about the Catholic Church. Still, there was much about the new Pope that gave me pause. Part of my ambiguity could be traced to the very reason I was in Rome in the first place. I had been invited to chair a panel for the annual meeting of Nobel Peace Prize laureates. Peace Prize, is that how you say that? I don't know why I'm not. Well, it's probably because it doesn't have as many syllables as I thought it did. They had gathered for a conference on Africa, where an estimated 30 million people are measures, including widespread condom use. A word from the Catholic Church and millions of lives could be saved. Before becoming Pope, Cardinal Ratzinger was a staunch defender of the magisterium of the Catholic Church, which holds that the use of birth control is a mortal sin, and therefore that couples who use condoms may be condemning themselves to eternal damnation. This is one of the reasons why I was like, I mean, seriously. They sound just like the Sadducees and the Pharisees. As prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. What? I know what they are. The end all and be all of Catholics. He had also silenced advocates of liberation theology, attacked those who advanced a more progressive stance on homosexuality, and declared secret the details of church investigations into accusations made against priests of certain serious ecclesiastical crimes, including sexual abuse. When the Holy Father approached me, I asked, "Your Eminence, in view of the tragedy unfolding in Africa, for the sake of the sanctity of life, would you consider changing the Church's position on the use of condoms?" I don't know if the devout Catholics to my left were more horrified or terrified, but upon hearing my plea, she leaped backward, rattling the multitude of St. Christopher medals and rosary beads she'd brought along in hopes of attaining her blessing. Apparently, she feared I'd be struck dead right then and there, and she wanted to get as far away from me as possible just in case the lightning bolt missed its target. Meanwhile, the Pope gazed beneficently, imparting "God bless you" as he passed. From that encounter, I embarked on an intensive period of interviews, ultimately focusing on how 37 American Catholics interpret their faith. I set out to speak with Catholics who were well known for depth and expertise on a particular issue or profession and who represented different walks of life: actors, historians, journalists, commentators, political figures, educators, judges, cardinals, priests, nuns, union leaders, doctors, activists, comedians, businessmen, and students. They range in age from 19 to 86. They are white, Latino, and African American. They are liberal and conservative, women and men. They embody the old order and the harborings of what's to come. They include those who love the church and those who feel the church wronged them. Some have left, others have come back. Some work for change, and still others have devoted their lives to upholding the institution as it is. Most are lifelong Catholics. One is a midlife convert from Judaism to Catholicism, and another is a convert from Catholicism to Islam. Looking back, that 30-second encounter with the Roman pontiff echoed the dilemma with which almost every Catholic I interviewed grapples. On the one hand, there is the ingrained principle that members are of the hierarchy. The Pope, the cardinals, the bishop, and the priests are the direct conduits between the laity and God. As such, these men are regarded with respect, sometimes even awe, and are bestowed a generous portion of the benefit of the doubt. Thus, there is an instinctive reaction against questioning their judgment, not to mention their supremacy. On the other hand, few would deny that some of what the Catholic Church teaches, and sometimes the manner in which it conducts itself, is at odds with the very values Catholics are taught that Jesus preached. Speaking truth to power is a strong tradition in the Catholic faith, starting with the Savior himself, challenging the Pharisees and the Jewish authorities. But the message has always been mixed, as Catholics are taught both obedience to authority and to venerate saints who challenged the status quo. I found that those raised in the pre-Vatican II church voiced aggravation either with the changes they've seen or with the promise of change that remains unfulfilled. Those who came of age post-Vatican II are unshaken by the failures of the hierarchy because they never developed expectations about the integrity of the institutions, having begun their political awareness during or after the Watergate era and having witnessed two presidents facing impeachment, the financial scandals of the savings and loans, WorldCom and Enron, the mortgage crisis, the betting and steroids scandal in the sports world, and the pedophile scandals in the church. But what quickly became apparent during the interviews was the distinction Catholics are able to make between their personal spiritual journeys and their varying attitudes towards the institutional church. Criticism of the church is a heartfelt concern, but rarely is it an obstacle to a deep sense of faith, a strong connection to the community, and a firm commitment to carrying forward the message of Jesus in one's daily life. Even those who've left the church agreed to be interviewed for a book about being Catholic. This speaks to the undeniable force with which the Catholic faith penetrates to the bones and endures. Its message of social justice, piety, prayer, spirituality, and intellectual curiosity stays with Catholics throughout their lives, regardless of whether they attend services or agree with the Pope. The old adage, once a Catholic, always a Catholic, rings true. The word Catholic is from the Greek katolika, meaning universal. And when seemingly disparate voices can all declare, I'm a Catholic, they are acknowledging they're part of the universal, the whole. We're all one. At the end of the day, that is the consistent message of faith. What comes across in these stories is that the church is, by definition, full of contradictions. Jesus has come but is still coming. Jesus is divine but fully human. Jesus died but rose from the dead. Jesus saved the world, but the world needs to be saved now more than ever. The church is the bride of Christ and also the mystical body of Christ. The church has always embraced conflict and contradiction. Ask two theologians about the church and one will portray the triumphalism of the church, its glory, its majesty, its divinity, its rich history, while another will proclaim the poverty of the church, its need to pursue social justice, its missionary rule to aid the excluded. When parishioners wonder what that all means, they're told, Mass is over, go in peace. The Catholic lady says, I don't get all these conflicting messages, and the hierarchy responds, yes, you don't get it, but that's our faith. Perhaps that's a source of strength, as Catholics then can feel comfortable with other areas of life where conflict is inherent. In the midst of agonizing loss, there's a sudden openness. In the midst of euphoric love, there is overwhelming fear. In the midst of rage over injustice, there is the possibility of revolutionary change. Oh, it breaks me up because that is the hope of the United States, which I see disappearing. I see injustices just continue to triumph. Maybe not, maybe it's on a downslide, maybe it is. But you know, real Catholics with real faith have depended on God for real transformation, just like every spiritual person has. Oh, but those words, whoo! It's common for conflicting emotions to coexist. And the Catholic approach allows for both to be held in one's hands at the same time. And yet Catholics are profoundly disturbed. Woo! Oh no! I did, but not like this, not in the introduction. Holy smokes. It is because Catholics do crave justice. I'm not saying like nobody else does. I'm just saying that Catholics they have been in it for the long haul. Even when they've left the Catholic Church, they're in it for the long haul because most of them are in it for the right reasons. But put money and power in anyone's hands, and then you have to wonder. And yet, Catholics are profoundly disturbed. Generations ago, the search for spirituality came predefined and prepackaged. The Baltimore Catechism not only gave us all the answers, it even gave us the questions to ask. I have that. My sister gave it to me. Now all that packaging has been subjected to criticism and has been found wanting. Religion today is at a time of enormous change when addressing such issues as immigration, the mishandling of the pedophile crisis, the notion of a just war in the post of 9/11 world, the suppression of women, the intolerance of homosexuality, birth control, abortion, euthanasia, stem cell research, along with a host of other issues that Anna Quindlen defines as gynecological theology, Catholics express anguish, disappointment, frustration, anger, and despair. As a result, some have left the church altogether. Some simply dismiss the hierarchy, and others work for change. We're all in a boat that has been rocked. Everyone is struggling to find the proper balance for comfort, for truth. I hope this constellation of voices will add a bit of much needed ballast. Each person's journey within the faith is his or her own. Religion is an intensely personal, deeply felt system of beliefs. It's rooted in history, in conviction, in paganry, in family, and in heritage. It inflicts our every action and thought. Religion at its core has always been about the search for ultimate meaning. All of us are engaged in that exploration, but not always in a conscientious way. The people interviewed in this book face that journey with rare courage. These stories, raw, emotion-laden, and honest, give us guideposts with which to conduct our own search for meaning in our quest for spiritual authenticity. This is what gave me a reclamation, if you might say, back to the Catholic Church. I'm not going to read the preface. I'm not much for a preface, and it's pretty long. The last things that she says, and when I think of the Beatitudes, I'm happy to be included in this wonderfully inclusive and affirming Catholic faith. I agree with her there when you read them. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are they who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the clean of heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are they who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when they insult you and persecute you and utter every kind of evil against you falsely because of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward will be great in heaven. Thus they persecuted the prophets who were before you. That's Matthew chapter 5, verse 3 through 10. Being Catholic now. The first person that we're going to read, and I'm going to go ahead and read her. Yeah, it's not very long. And then we'll be rolling because there's 37 of these, I think. Anna Quindlen, born July 8th, 1952, a best-selling author and Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist. She joined the staff of Newsweek in 1999, where she writes the Last Word column every other week. There's a picture of her right there. Let's see what she has to say about being Catholic now. When I was a kid, there were endless arguments that seemed to have no point. Whether it was proper, for example, if my parents went to a wedding in a Methodist church, this always seems like the how many angels can dance on a pin argument, since we were never invited to weddings that weren't in Catholic churches. In my entire neighborhood where I grew up, there was no one who wasn't Catholic. No one had married into a family who wasn't Catholic. There was a rhythm to the liturgical year which gave this incredible shape to your life in a way that had almost nothing to do with faith. It's like the distinction between the Baltimore Catechism and theology. The Baltimore Catechism gave this knee-jerk shape to every element of Catholicism that was absolutely anti-intellectual and unquestioning, as opposed to real theology. And so much of our lives as young Catholics was about that sort of ruling affirmation, a ruling affirmative. What would happen if you unwittingly took a bite of a bologna sandwich on a Friday? Much of it was the functional equivalent of keeping kosher. Why does one do this? You don't ask this question. You just do it unthinkingly, and there is supposed to be a virtue in the unthinking aspect of it, which of course was bound to catch up with me sooner or later. Real faith is something that happens later on. It is the dichotomy that is in the church today, which is that as an instrument of social justice, nobody does it better. But this is always overshadowed by the shalt not pronouncements that seem to have little to do with social justice, human frailty, or real faith. The church is always in this state of huge dichotomy when you look back through history between form and function, between humanity and this rigid hierarchical rule-making. I'm struck by the fact that about 80% of what I care about politically is also what the church supports. When I wrote a column in support of both legal and undocumented immigrants, I got a number of email messages of support from priests, which was a first for me in recent years. And there is the zone of gynecological theology where the church is totally wrong. For American Catholics, the church's stand on birth control or even abortion is at some level irrelevant. I'm talking about third world Catholic women who, when they get pregnant, don't have an additional child, but either die or have a baby who dies. The deep dichotomies of the church are frustrating to me, especially because it does do so much good. When our oldest child first described himself as an atheist, he was 16 and my husband and I looked at each other and said, right on schedule. Until they went to college, our children had to go to Mass every Sunday. People would say to me, don't they get upset about that, not wanting to go? But that is part of the tradition. We were part of that tradition too. We remember all the days when we said, I don't want to go to Mass. And the response was, get in the car. Afterward, we would talk in the car about the sermons or the gospel. Every year on Easter Sunday, I'd start, and I could see the kids eyes rolling, and I'd say, now notice what is the first word Jesus said. And from the back seat, I would hear, woman. And I would go, that is correct. He turns to Mary Magdalene and says, woman, why are you crying? And by the 5th year, it was like, no, Mom, not this thing about Mary Magdalene again. That's clearly in the stage of their lives where their attitude is, if an institution doesn't work for you on a profound level, you don't need the institution. That may play out for the rest of their lives because there's no question that they didn't have the Catholic upbringing I had. They didn't go to Catholic school. They weren't steeped in the shalt nots. I remember it controlling every aspect of my life. I see them going through the process that we went through when my husband, who's also a lifelong Catholic, and I were in college. Both of us had very little, if anything, to do with the church. Then we got married at the church, and as soon as we had kids, boom, we were right back where we started from, because there was no question that we were going to raise them Catholic, if only to give that kind of grounding from which to question, reject, move away, and maybe move back again. As a kid, I had the classic models of heaven and hell. One is up, the other is down. One is cool, the other is hot. One is blue, the other is red. My mother died when I was 19, and then I thought about it all the time, about the notion of whether there was afterlife, and if there was, what it meant. Whether the death of good people left a different vapor trail than the death of not so good people. My own profound sense is that the most believed people we know don't die. They're as real in our minds as they were when they could walk through the door. I'm more questioning and agnostic about that than I was when I was much younger, which is unfortunate, because now more than ever I need it to be true. I think that is the crux of faith. My greatest moral education came not from Catholic school or the Ten Commandments, but from my mother. It had more to do with being kind and generous in your dealings with other people. It had a lot more to do with empathy and humanity, and less to do with the doctrinal approach. My mother had very strong feelings about right and wrong based on the New Testament approach of loving thy neighbor as thyself. Many people seem to find this weird disconnect between my Catholic background and my political liberalism. The New Testament was such a profoundly political liberal document that it is inconceivable to me that conservatism has come out of it. It's driven explicitly and constantly by the need to do better by other people, by this moral obligation to do your best by and for others. That shaped my political sense in every way. If you understand history, you understand the extent to which Jesus hung around with unrelated women. It's so outside the realm of proper behavior, he had to have been trying to teach us something by that. I don't do Catholic guilt. I don't feel guilty about being at odds with the church over the things I'm at odds with them over. As a child, I internalized the sense that I didn't need to feel that bad about anything because I could make it better on a Saturday afternoon in a dark place. When we first started to go to confession, we really had nothing to confess. That is why we made everything up. And by the time we really had things to confess, either they were things that the church had taught us were so shameful that we didn't want to confess them, or they seemed too amorphous to be confessable. If I were Pope for a year, I'd be the second woman Pope. The first thing I would do is ordain women, because that would lift the church. In many ways, we have seen society change for the better with women at high levels in business, in the judiciary, and in politics. What we would see in the church is a completely different approach to attitudes across the board. We would receive parishes throughout this country and the world. There are many women waiting in the wings. Then I would bring those women priests together for a special synod with their male counterparts. Part of the problem with the church is that it knows how to talk but doesn't know how to listen. I would probably spend 6 months with people just listening to one another. Then I would lift the ban on artificial birth control, especially in third world countries, and say that people should keep themselves safe through condom use. In vitro fertilization, that's absolutely an absurd prohibition. I'd promote a humane approach to death. I was very sad when the church involved itself in the Terry Schiavo case in inappropriate ways. I remember that case. I also, after reading this book, looked up that Baltimore Catechism, which again I have a copy of. So getting back into sort of the trenches of what Catholics are all about, I'd also look for a more conciliatory, humane, Christ-like attitude toward Catholics who have divorced. The Catholic has caused so much pain and so much cynicism about the annulment process, which has become the church exercising control over the divorce process and has nothing to do with what we used to think about of as annulment. All of my sister priests would be doing the same thing, so I'd be in really good company. John Paul epitomized the dichotomy I was talking about, and the dovetailing of his papacy and the sex abuse scandals were very hard on my relationship with the institutional church. For a while, I went a little in and a little out in terms of going to Mass every Sunday. The parish in which we worshiped helped my perspective of the institutional church because it's run by the Paulist fathers. It's a church that does everything that a good church should do, from engaging parishioners in the actual form of the Mass to providing all kinds of social services that are so important to its neighborhood. But I've been struggling with my relationship with the institutional church and whether I ratify what I consider the negative things it does in its name by attending Mass. Exactly my feelings. This is exactly them. On the other hand, I feel proud of being Catholic, and it's in fits and starts all the time. As a reporter, I was so proud of being Catholic so much of the time because I had this sort of constant experience where someone would say, I know that you are really interested in teenage pregnancy, and there is this great program for teen mothers. So I would go, and the person who was running the program would take me around and talk about what she was doing and how many young women were there and so on. I would be looking around for 20 minutes and then look at her and look at the pantsuit, look at the shoes, and ask her, are you a nun? Yes, she'd say, but she wouldn't want me to call her sister. I get emails all the time when I touch on anything Catholic people say. I know you're kind. You memorize the Baltimore Catechism, but you don't go to Mass. You're divorced and you've had an abortion. And I think if these people could only see me every Sunday morning. I mean, how much that judgment hurts people. Ugh, I sound so lovely. How much that judgment hurts people, no matter. If they could see me every Sunday morning, if these people only knew that I was married in church. And all my children have lived through the sacraments. People presume these things when you're politically liberal, and yet some of the most thoughtful and intelligent liberals I know are practicing Catholics. On the other hand, there is a substantial group of intelligent and thoughtful people who are incredulous that you could force anything still to do with the Catholic Church as a person of thought and intellect. It is an acceptable bias to assume that at some level Catholicism is just dumb. Okay, the next person is Andrew Sullivan. Andrew Sullivan is I don't know, I can't see. Proactive, vocal, and political commentator for The Atlantic. Oh, but The Atlantic was bought out by conservatives. So let's see what Andrew Sullivan has to say the next time we meet here in the classroom. I said I have a hard time with April. That's the month that my husband died, so I have a little bit of a hard time with April. So, and then reading that, whoo, have I felt those things? That is for sure. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. Thank you so much for joining me here in the classroom. We are reading Being Catholic now. I hope that I am not a blubbering idiot tomorrow. Let's see what happens on day 175. We are ending day 174 in the classroom. Thanks for joining me.